So you're thinking about buying a Trident 660. Well, you've come to the right place because I'm going to talk all about this bad boy. We are going to do a 10-minute comprehensive review in and out, the good, the bad, and the ugly. There's really not too much ugly about this bike, honestly, but there are a few things that I think could be better. And then finally, I'm going to tell you whether or not you should spend your hard-earned cash on this motorcycle right here. So a Trident 660 is a middleweight naked bike, and we're going to zone in on what makes it a naked bike. So if you think about like a Ninja or a Gixxer or really any sports bike, they are fully fared bikes. But when you think about the Trident, the MT-07, the SV650, even the Speed Triple, they are naked bikes. That's the class of bike they're in. And that means that they are partially fared, meaning the engine of this bike is more exposed. Actually, they're easier to work on too. If you've ever worked on a sports bike, they're kind of a pain in the ass because you have to take the fairings off. What else makes this a naked bike is the styling. So you can see the Trident 660 has a very retro styling. It's kind of like that 1960s retro bobber feel, right? A lot of bikes like that are retro. That's the first camp of styling. And then more modern, we have neo-futuristic bikes like the MT-07 or Triumph's Speed Triple. They have more of a futuristic look. I think about the Speed Triple's insectoid headlight, or the MT-07's very unusually square and small headlight. These are more futuristic stylings. So that's what makes it a naked bike. Next, I want to talk about what makes this bike a middleweight, and that is that the engine size is 660, so it's 660 displacement. That squarely puts it into the camp of middleweight bikes like the MT-07, the SV650, Kawasaki. All your major brands have these type of bikes, and honestly, they all have middleweight naked bikes that are highly competitive in the market. So they're all kind of, their performance is just margins apart. So it's a tough competition when it comes to naked bikes. Now, let's talk about the guts of this bike. What really makes this bike tick? It has a dual overhead cam, 12 valve, liquid cooled 660cc engine. And I think the thing to zone in on with this bike is the fact that the engine is 3-cylinder and they are in line, which means that the power distribution on this bike is going to be very smooth. We think about like an MT-07 where when you give it a little torque in first gear, it's going to buck, right? You could buck yourself right off that bike. This bike is more suitable, I suppose, in some senses for a beginner because it's not going to have that power delivery, especially the older models, 2021, 2022, that don't have a sport mode. So the engine is delivering 47 foot-pounds of torque, 81 horsepower, more than enough to get you going. So if we're thinking about the delivery, compare it to like a 500, this bike is going to be pretty fast. It's been described as a gateway drug to fast bikes, meaning it's not a speed triple. You know, it's not going to knock your socks off in terms of speed, but it does have plenty of speed, especially for someone who is just getting into this fast bike kind of category. Like, this bike is a fun, zippy bike to ride. It really opens up more when you get to the third and the fourth gear versus having that torquiness up front. Now let's talk about the other thing that makes this a naked bike. Naked bikes I think of as kind of a hybrid between a cruiser and a sports bike. And the reason being is the riding triangle. So when we think about the riding triangle of like a Harley or a cruiser, your feet are way out in the front. But this bike is more like a sports bike where your feet are a little bit tucked behind you, maybe not nearly as behind you as in a sports bike, but they are still yet straight down and a little bit tucked behind you. Additionally, the seat on this bike, which I may add, is 31 inches high, might not be appropriate for shorter users, and it might not be appropriate for beginner users. So the riding triangle on this bike has a more aggressive lean than a cruiser. So if we're thinking about on a Harley, you have upright handlebars, right? You're not really leaned in, you're not putting more weight on that front tire. But with this bike, the inclined seat and also the lower handlebars force you to lean a little bit more into a more aggressive posture. So this bike allows you to put more of the weight on that front tire, which is great for acceleration. If you're trying to really squid right out of the gate, this is going to be the bike to do it. But it is not as leaned in as a sports bike. So a sports bike, you're going to be more leaned in, more pressure on your handlebars. Now, the one thing I will say is I am coming from a cruiser where my hands are more up here, and I definitely, after about 30 or 40 minutes, I can feel the pressure that's being put on my wrist because I'm putting a lot of my body weight on my wrist when I ride this bike. So let's go ahead and hear how the stock exhaust sounds. And one thing to think about when buying this bike is if you're really interested in aftermarket sound and having a louder exhaust, this bike does not accommodate slip-on exhaust. You have to replace the entire exhaust system, which may be fairly expensive for someone who doesn't really want to make a lot of modifications to their Trident.
So let's go ahead and hear how this bike sounds with the stock exhaust.
I think it sounds pretty good, honestly, and I don't think I would bother putting on an aftermarket exhaust. I think it's entirely adequate for the type of bike that it is and in the price range that it is. So let's go ahead and talk about the instrument cluster, but before we do that, I want to talk about some of the features that come standard on your 2025 Trident 660s that was not available on previous models. So one that I think is very important is this bike is missing cruise control. All 2025s do come equipped with cruise control. I would find it extremely helpful to have this when I'm doing city bobbing, or more so if I'm on the highway. And I'm not saying that it's a highway bike, but if I'm on the highway and I'm kind of going one speed for a long period of time, it would be really nice if they had this feature. So if you need to have it, my recommendation is to go find a used or buy a new 2025 Trident 660. Again, remember that there is going to be possibly an 800, so you may want to hold off for that. The other thing that comes standard on your 2025 Tridents that is not available on previous models is the quick shifter. So I have not used a quick shifter before. I cannot tell you if it is worth the money, but I have watched a few reviews where people say it is very nice to have. Another thing that comes standard on the 2025s that is not on previous models is the sport mode. So this bike here is a 2022. It comes equipped with a rain mode and a road mode, which are entirely adequate, but a sport mode will make it more competitive against the likes of an MT-07 or an SV650, which may have a little more torque up front, a little more power just right out of the gate. This bike again has that three-line in-cylinder engine, which makes it a little smoother, but also on the opposite end of that, a little less torquey. Very simple. You can see we have our fuel gauge at the top. We have our gear indicator bottom left. You can also see we have our miles per hour, and then we have our tachometer towards the top with our RPMs. Additionally, you do have an indicator of your low fuel status, as well as some other icons. Alrighty, now that we've talked all about the Trident 660, a little bit of history, the engine, the riding position, what is a naked bike, we are going to take this bad boy on the road and ride it and tell you how it feels to ride the Trident.
So let's go.
You can see this bike is plenty fast. You can get up very quickly to 40, 50, 60 miles per hour. I believe it has a 2.7 second to 60 mile per hour mark. So it is a fast bike. Once you get in the fourth and fifth gear, you could really goose it and get up to 100 very quickly if you wanted to. Again, it's very agile, easy to move around. As you can see, just whipping this bike around a little bit. I mean, it's a fun bike to ride. Like, if we're talking about fun meter, like what's a fun bike to ride, you know, definitely a lot more fun than my Rebel 500, a lot more zippy and quick than my Rebel 500, and it inspires more confidence on the highway. We're going to take it on the highway here just in a little bit, just to see how it handles. Again, it's not the most comfortable bike after about 45 minutes. The Trident 660, it's a fast bike. It is a gateway bike to faster bikes. So like you might start with a Trident 660 and end up with an MT-09 or an MT-07. You might even do a speed triple. That's a very formidable bike as well. A lot of people go from a sports bike to a naked bike because they have back problems, or they're looking for a bike that's more comfortable as they age out of sports bikes. And they're a lot of fun. They're fast bikes. They're not as quick as your sports bike, but they're still a pretty great bike overall. I'm enjoying mine. I've owned mine for about 2 months now. I've put about 2,000 miles on it. I'm just stacking the miles. It's a fun bike. It's fun. It's whippy. It's quick. Again, after about 40 minutes, it goes from being very comfortable to being not so comfortable. Really, it doesn't stand up to the test of a longer ride. And I don't think that's a flaw. I think that's or it's not a bug, it's a design element, meaning like they never intended for this bike to be a cruiser or an adventure bike. They intended it to be a retro city bobber that has a lot of fun power behind it. And that's exactly what it is. It's fulfilling or manifesting its destiny. Fun bike, perfect for the city. Again, I live on the outskirts. I've driven out a little bit to Caldwell Woods today to do this video. We're going to take this bike on the highway in a second here and see how it holds up under highway conditions. And I've ridden it a few times on the highway before. I can tell you that it's confidence inspiring, but it's definitely not the right tool for the job. If you're going to be on the highway for only like 10 or 15 minutes, perfectly fine. It holds its own in terms of speed, but if you're going to be on the highway for an hour or two, or if you're doing a trip out to see a friend, like you're not going to probably want to ride this bike. Can you do it? Yes. If you want to, you can. Should you do it? It's up to you, but it's not that much comfortable.
Let's talk about Trident 660, whether or not you should buy it. It's really about how you're going to use that bike. I think the verdict is it depends. And so if your intention is a one case use, meaning like I'm going to go ride this bike, bob around the city, I'm only going to be doing 30-minute commutes at most, then I think the Trident 660 is a super fun, super accessible bike. I even think it could be a good bike for a beginner. If your intention, though, is I'm actually going to want a bike that I can ride to town, ride around the city or my neighborhood, in addition to I'm looking to tour or take it on vacations, do long rides out to, the suburbs. I don't think that this is going to be the bike you want. I think this is a good secondary bike. So if you're looking for a one-use bike and it is city bobber, go get a Trident. It has unparalleled technology, meaning you can't get all of the technology that's packed into this bike on any of its competition, MT-07, SV650. They all fall short in terms of that package. The bike is fun, but ultimately if you're looking to ride a bike for long periods of time, to take it touring on vacations, I don't think the Trident 660 really fits that bill. Can it do it? Yes. I rode it on the highway for an hour and a half the other day. And is it capable? Is it confidence inspiring? Yes, but it's not comfortable. The riding position, and this might be a little bit of a subjective take, because I think if you take a sports bike rider and you put them on a naked bike, they're going to say it's the most comfortable thing in the world. And then if you take a cruiser and you put them on a naked bike, they're going to go, God, I can't ride more than 20 minutes on this bike, right? Subjective. But ultimately, if you're looking for a bike that's going to go long distances as well as be a good city bike, I would say maybe go for an adventure bike or maybe even a cruiser. Those are going to give you the comfort that you need, as well as you can bob around town. But if you have the budget to get two bikes and you're looking for that more versatile type of bike, go get a Trident 660 and ride that one around the city and do your commuting. And then when you have longer vacations, you want to drive out of town, get an adventure bike or get a cruiser. And I think, you can't go wrong that way. Get two bikes. So if you like the content and you want to see more of me, more content, more bikes, I would really appreciate if you subscribe. We're a new channel. So if you go in, we only have about 4 or 5 videos. I would really appreciate a subscribe, a like. It goes a long way. Thank you.